Imagine a world where a single injection could transform a lifelong illness into a manageable condition, or even eradicate it entirely. Where diseases written off as incurable just a decade ago are now facing innovative treatments designed in European laboratories. Now imagine the stakes behind it all. Billions of euros on the line, regulatory bodies wrestling with unprecedented technologies, and a race against time to bring therapies to market before the money and patience run out. Welcome to the new battleground of global biotech, Europe. Today, we're pulling back the curtain on three companies standing at the vanguard of the continent's life sciences revolution. Each is at a different stage of development, one profitable and scaling rapidly, one striving for that elusive break-even point, and one taking a high-wire gamble on tomorrow's science. But as the innovation engine revs at full speed, a pressing question looms. Can Europe's biotech firms balance the sky-high promise of new medicine with the crushing weight of risk, regulation, and ethical concerns? Let's dive in. Despite what many might assume, biotech isn't just glitzy lab coats and epiphanies worthy of Nobel Prizes. It's a fiercely competitive business, with economics that can be as brutal as the science is inspiring. For decades, pharmaceutical giants like Roche, Novartis, and Sanofi were the only names most people knew in the drug industry. They ran vast internal R&D machines, spending tens of billions to develop new therapies. But over the last 25 years, something radical happened. Smaller, agile biotech companies began outpacing even the largest pharma firms in raw innovation. That shift is dramatic. Today, roughly 70% of newly approved drugs originate from biotechs, not pharmaceutical conglomerates. The result? An investment landscape that's as dynamic as it is unpredictable. Let's get our bearings on who's who. We can break European biotechs into three main categories. First, the profitable companies, those rare players who've beaten the odds, survived the long, unforgiving journey from discovery to approval, and now rake in steady cash from blockbuster therapies. Second, the revenue growth firms, ambitious outfits with regulatory approvals and market momentum, but who haven't yet crossed into profitability. These are your medium-risk, high-potential bets. Third, the development stage pioneers, companies with little or no revenue, betting everything on the next big breakthrough. These are the riskiest, but sometimes most rewarding prospects. Europe, and especially the European Union, is ramping up efforts to support this ecosystem. The European Commission recently launched a biotech and biomanufacturing hub, with a goal of pulling in over $20 billion in new investments. In 2024 alone, European biotechs captured $4.3 billion in venture capital. Even as the U.S. remains the undisputed leader in biotech innovation, the old continent is quickly catching up. And with substantial government and private funding, the continent's innovation hubs, London, Stockholm, Copenhagen, Amsterdam, are coming alive. Let's meet our three exemplars, each at a different stage of the biotech life cycle. First, Sobi, or Swedish orphan Biovitrum, is the heavyweight here, a Stockholm-based powerhouse specializing in hematology and immunology. With a market value topping $10.7 billion and 2024 sales of $2.5 billion, Sobi is no longer a plucky startup, but a proven engine of growth. Their flagship product? Altuvoct, a next-generation therapy for people with hemophilia, a painful, chronic blood clotting disorder that, for generations, required frequent and sometimes dangerous infusions. Altuvoct changes the game, offering weekly injections instead of the old regimen of dosing every 2 or 3 days. Not only is this a massive quality-of-life improvement for patients, but Altuvoct's longer half-life also makes therapy more effective and convenient, particularly for young boys who lead active lives and are at constant risk of bleeds from the inevitable bumps and scrapes of childhood. Thanks to a strategic partnership with French pharma titan Sanofi, Altuvoct's sales are surging. Analysts at SVB Securities predict it could soon be a blockbuster, with revenue topping $1 billion. The numbers back this up. In just the first quarter of 2025, Sobi's revenue hit SEK 6.8 billion, much of it driven by Altuvoct. But even among established players, the race is relentless. Rival therapies, patent cliffs, and the ever-present threat of reimbursement changes keep the pressure on. Investors may be drawn to Sobi for its current profits, but no biotech is ever truly out of the game or out of danger. Let's shift to our next company, Ascendis Pharma, based in Denmark and falling squarely in the revenue growth category. With a market cap of $10 billion, Ascendis isn't a minnow, yet it's still fighting for the profitability badge. What sets Ascendis apart is its proprietary technology platform, which essentially blends proven biology with cutting-edge sustained-release delivery. That means drugs that provide longer-lasting effects with far fewer injections. Their lead product is Skytrofa, a therapy for growth hormone deficiency. The market is big, the need is urgent, and the patient experience is, frankly, grueling with existing therapies. Skytrofa's promise? Fewer injections, less hassle, better adherence, better outcomes. And the market agrees. Skytrofa's sales soared 84% in Q1 of 2025, hitting $82.4 million. The firm expects full-year revenue to top $480 to $500 million. Analysts at Jefferies believe Skytrofa is poised to capture significant market share, and Ascendis may hit full profitability as soon as next year. But here's the catch. While the top line is growing, Ascendis is still burning cash. They must continue scaling, fending off better-funded competitors, and navigating a regulatory system that, in Europe, is both more cautious and less predictable than in the United States. If they succeed, early investors win big. If not, the value can evaporate overnight. Finally, the brave new world of development-stage biotechs. Let's talk about Unicor. This Dutch company with a market value of $700 million is making a high-stakes bet on gene therapy for Huntington's disease. For those unfamiliar, Huntington's is a devastating neurodegenerative disorder, genetic in origin, which ultimately robs patients of their cognitive and physical capabilities and, eventually, their lives. There's currently no cure, and barely even a treatment. Unicor is attempting what most would have called science fiction 10 years ago, using a gene therapy to silence the mutant protein at the root of the disease. The stakes could not be higher. The upside, if successful, is enormous. Not just financially for investors, but, more importantly, for the thousands of families living in the shadow of this genetic time bomb. In a stroke of good news for Unicor and its backers, the US FDA recently tagged their lead program as a breakthrough therapy, a coveted status that can speed both trials and approval. The company has also managed its cash well. After aggressive cost-cutting, it now has over $400 million in liquidity, enough to fund operations into late 2027. But the risks are equally gigantic. In the words of biotech veteran and investor Mark Kleiman, for every one gene therapy that makes it, a dozen flame out. The road is littered with tragic failures and dashed hopes. If Unicor's clinical trials don't deliver, the company's valuation could implode almost overnight. So why is everyone from venture capitalists to the European Commission betting so heavily on these companies and on the sector as a whole? Beyond the promise of blockbuster profits, the European biotech sector is now seen as critical to the continent's strategic autonomy. As geopolitical tensions rise and global supply chains are thrown into chaos, Europe needs its own innovation pipeline. That's a powerful argument, says Claire Scantlebury, Director General of Europa Bio. She told the Financial Times, "The EU biotech and biomanufacturing hub isn't just about investment. It's about ensuring Europe won't be left behind in the next wave of scientific progress." There's another wild card in play: artificial intelligence. According to McKinsey, integrating AI into European biopharma could accelerate drug discovery and slash costs by 20%. Imagine shaving years off the timeline from concept to cure. If AI delivers on this promise, it could vault European biotech to the head of the global pack. Yet for all this optimism, the path ahead is riddled with landmines. The regulatory environment is both rigorous and fragmented. Whereas the U.S. Food and Drug Administration provides a single point of contact for American firms, Europe's regulatory landscape is a complex web of agencies, each with its own standards and timetables. This slows down approvals, increases costs, and sometimes leaves even the most promising products languishing in bureaucratic limbo. And then there are the ethical questions. Gene editing, personalized medicine, and AI-driven therapies all raise profound concerns. How do we ensure access, avoid unintended consequences, and maintain public trust? European policymakers and ethicists are only beginning to grapple with these dilemmas, even as the science speeds ahead. So, can Europe's biotech champions navigate the minefield of regulation, risk, and public sentiment to deliver on their promise? Or will the combination of scientific complexity, ethical debate, and financial uncertainty drag the sector down before it hits critical mass? In the next half of this story, we'll plunge deeper into these questions, unpacking the regulatory hurdles, ethical controversies, and the fierce competition for investment dollars. We'll look at what could tip the balance, towards either spectacular success or catastrophic failure. But as we stand today, with billions invested, patients desperate for progress, and innovation accelerating at breakneck speed, the outcome is anything but certain. As we pivot from the present achievements and risks of Europe's biotech flagship companies, let's look forward. What's truly at stake? What will determine if Europe's biotech sector becomes the world's engine of medical breakthroughs, or falls behind the US and Asia in the global race for innovation? The years ahead hold staggering possibilities, but also new hazards. Let's unpack the future. What could go right, what could go wrong, and how the outcomes will directly impact patients, investors, and society. Europe's biotech sector stands at a crossroads. If current momentum holds, and with investments like the European Commission's $20 billion biotech and biomanufacturing hub, the region could become a premier global hub for medical science. More than $4.3 billion in venture funding flowed into European biotechs in 2024 alone. That's not just a financial endorsement. It's a bet on Europe producing the next class of blockbuster drugs and transformative therapies. Take Altuviiio from Sobi. Recent data saw Sobi's revenue surge to SEK 6.8 billion in the first quarter of 2025, thanks in large part to Altuviiio's stunning market penetration. Analysts from SVB Securities boldly predict Altuviiio is on a path to blockbuster status, over $1 billion in annual sales. If this trend continues, European biotech could begin to rival the US not just in research but in world-changing products. But the future is never guaranteed. For every Altuviiio or Skytrofa, Ascendis Pharma's fast-growing growth hormone therapy, which saw an 84% year-on-year leap in sales, the sector is peppered with unicures, companies betting everything on high-risk, high-reward programs like gene therapy for Huntington's disease. If one of these gambles pays off, it could rewrite medicine. But if clinical trials falter, fortunes disappear overnight. Unicure has secured its cash runway into 2027, buying precious time, but not certainty. The broader forces shaping the future are even more profound. McKinsey experts estimate that AI in European pharma could slash drug discovery costs by 20%. Imagine, decades of trial and error compressed into months of simulation. This means more therapies, cheaper, and faster. But it also means fierce global competition. America's West Coast and China's biotech clusters are racing to exploit AI as well. Regulation will be a fundamental battleground. Europe's regulatory environment has a dual personality. On one hand, its safety-first ethos reassures patients and builds public trust. On the other, it can slow down or even strangle promising innovation. As Claire Scantlebury of Europa Bio warns, the EU must find a way to streamline the path from lab bench to hospital bedside if it wants to lead. Otherwise, its brightest minds and their startups may migrate to friendlier climates. And then there's the ethical dimension: gene editing, personalized medicine, therapies based on a patient's unique genome. These are not just technological challenges. They raise new questions. Who gets access? What about long-term effects? Will we see a two-speed Europe, where rich countries pull ahead in biotech advances, leaving others behind? But let's follow the thread of optimism. If Europe masters these complexities, the benefits are transformative. Rare diseases that once meant a lifetime of suffering could be tackled with a single injection, as is now the hope for gene therapies in hemophilia and Huntington's. Europe could set the global gold standard for safe, effective, and ethical biotech. Financially, biotech could become a pillar of the continent's economic future. The numbers are already impressive. Sobi's multi-billion-dollar sales, Ascendis on the threshold of profitability, Unicure flush with cash reserves. If the sector thrives, it will anchor thousands of high-skilled jobs, spill over into universities, and attract new generations of scientists and entrepreneurs. For the average person, these breakthroughs mean more than statistics. They mean longer lives for hemophiliacs, hope for families grappling with rare genetic disorders, and, potentially, cures for previously untreatable conditions. But make no mistake, there's a flip side. If regulatory logjams persist, if risk-averse funding dries up, or if high-profile clinical failures undermine trust, Europe's biotech boom could stall. The continent would remain a source of great science, but the best ideas and profits might be realized elsewhere. So what practical lessons can you take from this unfolding drama? First, biotech is not for the faint-hearted investor. Even as 70% of new drug approvals now originate from biotechs rather than pharma giants, the risk-reward calculus remains extreme. A single failed trial or regulatory rejection can wipe out years of progress and millions in value. But for those who do their homework, pick companies with strong pipelines and sound finances, like Sobi or Ascendis, the rewards can be life-changing. Second, pay attention to regulation as a signal. If you notice the European Medicines Agency moving to speed up drug approvals or signs of harmonized EU-wide rules, that's a bullish omen for innovation. Conversely, regulatory gridlock is a red flag. Third, watch the role of technology, especially AI and data platforms. Firms that meaningfully integrate machine learning in their R&D, who use AI not just as a buzzword but as a way to dramatically accelerate candidate selection, are better poised to leapfrog the competition. For example, McKinsey's estimate of a 20% cost reduction isn't just about margins. It's about making therapies for rare diseases economically viable, opening up new markets. Fourth, consider the ripple effects. Biotech advances can drive national economies, spur new industries, and even change geopolitics. Nations able to manufacture advanced therapies at scale become less dependent on imports and more able to set medical standards globally. Lastly, for patients and families, these breakthroughs are not abstract. Advocate for access. Stay vocal about safety and affordability. The more public scrutiny and demand for transparency, the likelier it is that biotech's advances will benefit the many, not just the few. So where does that leave us? Can Europe's biotech sector overcome regulation, risk, and controversy to deliver on its promise? The answer is, it's happening, but it's not guaranteed. Europe is uniquely positioned thanks to world-class universities, a tradition of medical excellence, and now a flood of private and public investment. Its companies like Sobi and Ascendis are already showing that European biotechs can make it big, both scientifically and commercially. Even riskier bets like Unicure illuminate Europe's capacity for high-risk, high-reward science. Yet the balance remains fragile. The next few years are critical. Will European leaders streamline regulation and nurture innovation? Will investors stay patient through inevitable setbacks? Will companies put ethics and access at the heart of their business model? The secret fact? Many Americans and even some Europeans don't realize that, for the first time ever, over 2/3 of new drug approvals are driven by biotechs, not big pharma. The innovation engine has shifted. Europe, if it plays its cards right, can lead this new era, not as a follower, but as an originator. What happens next will shape not just stock charts, but the health and well-being of millions. The story is still unwritten, and you, as investors, patients, professionals, or citizens, are part of it. If you found this analysis valuable, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video. Your engagement helps us reach more viewers and brings deeper dives into the industries that will shape our shared future. Have a question or want to see a breakdown of another sector? Drop a comment below. And remember, the future of medicine is being engineered right now.